Food is such an important ingredient in how we make the world a better place, because we all eat every day. So therefore, how we eat and what we eat and how it's produced has a fundamental impact on how we continue to exist on this planet as not just humans, but as an ecosystem overall. There's no one part of the food system that you can fix independently. So you can produce great food, but then how do you make sure that's affordable and accessible to everybody? Also, the market gardener needs to make a living. You know, you can't just produce the food, you have to also think about where that fits in the food system and how we create a healthy local food ecosystem.
Why did it? If somebody's got to earn a living, and it's all I know. There was 140 coos at its peak and about 450 ewes. Today there's 22 cows and about 90 ewes. I decided that I was cutting numbers a bit in response to high fertiliser and input prices and reducing profitability, with a nod to trying to be more aware and less damaging to the farm around us. The first thing we were told when you came home, if you can leave it better than you got it, and just mind you're only looking after it for the next generation. It's not really yours. With that in mind, you think, well, what was better? In the 60s, 70s, to a degree, it was produce. It was drained, it was reseeded, it was as much production as you get. It has now moved on to about the environment and the climate, but we still need food. There's no reason why we can't have both, and that, I think, is the regenerative and sustainable approach. In a month's time, you could come here and I could show you 150 different species of grass and plants. It would be a shame to see that disappearing. And if I can still produce food and make a living round about having all this, then that's all the better. Because I do think there's a value in this. And maybe that's my wee bit of, destroying the place we sit on.
It's not easy to get people to take climate action, because for a lot of people it sounds like either too big a thing for them to cope with, or it's something they can do but not very effective, like switching off the lights and all that kind of thing. But it struck me a long time ago that one of the things that people have absolutely no choice over whatsoever is eating. Most people in this country are lucky enough to have 3 meals a day, and with that you have choices about where your food comes from. And that kind of got me going on the idea of what can we do to encourage people to really look at, first of all, food miles, getting our food more locally, and secondly, how that food is produced in the first place, everything that goes into it, and understanding and knowing how the food is produced.
We're on Rainton Farm, which is just outside Gatehouse of Fleet. It's about 800 acres, and we diversified the farm about, almost 30 years ago now, where we started to make ice cream and we developed a visitor centre. And then about 10 years ago, we started to make cheese. We called ourselves the Ethical Dairy. It's about good animal welfare, it's about encouraging biodiversity, it's about giving your staff fair work. It's not just homing in on leaving the cows and calves together, although that's the bit that just really captures the imagination. But you've got to kind of look right across the board of all aspects of what you're doing. The diversification was to make the farm more secure. There was always this threat that farming subsidies would be going soon. And we're still at the stage 30 years later where you're thinking farm subsidies are going to be going soon. Ice cream at the time seemed to be the best fit for where we are. Then about 15 years ago, we started to look much more at the loss of biodiversity, climate change, resource depletion, and how we fitted into that. And one thing we can say about ice cream is it needs so much energy. And cheese was made here in the 1860s. And that was when there was no electricity initially. So the focus really for the past 10 years has been to get a variety of cheeses which can be stored using very little energy, and almost the opposite of ice cream. And we can post it around the country, which you definitely couldn't do with ice cream. So we've kind of cut out the middlemen in some ways.
years ago we moved to Dumfries and Galloway, having never farmed before. We were completely naive. There was no farming in our backgrounds or family or anything. So we kind of started off as hobby farmers, keeping sheep as pets, and the more we learnt about farming and food production, the more we learnt about how intrinsically it was linked to the environment, and how what we do on the farm has such a huge impact, not only on our farm but on the wider landscape, and also has a huge impact on the quality of the food that we produce as well. We keep a mixture of pigs, sheep, chickens and geese, and from them we produce wool, meat and eggs. And we try and sell everything that we produce on the farm direct to our customers, and try and keep it all local and focus on low food miles.
Well, I finished uni, I was studying carbon management, so I'd been learning about the impacts of climate change, and growing local food is one of the best ways that we can reduce our own carbon footprint, and there was a distinct lack of local food available at the time.
Yeah, we weren't entirely happy with the amount of pesticides and herbicides that seem to be on fruit and vegetables these days. So here, there's no pesticides, there's no herbicides, there's nothing bad on your food at all. It just feels so much better to eat food that you know where it's come from.
We grow vegetables and wildlife-friendly plants and flowers and herbs, and we keep chickens on a rotational grazing system, and we've got Highland cattle.
I guess it's about respect for the animals, really having to process that idea of, if we're going to eat meat, really knowing where our meats come from and what sort of life the animals had, and knowing that it's been treated with sort of care and respect.
One of the main questions that people ask is welfare of animals. Are they looked after? Are they in a natural environment? Are they happy? Are they having a good life? That has become, I think, increasingly a thought in the public mind. I mean, we're both first generation farmers, so it's like Mount Everest of a learning curve.
My background is actually land management and conservation. That's what I studied, so the farming aspect is new to me.
I used to work on a dairy farm as a kid, but then been out of farming for decades. So yeah, getting new ideas or just re-evaluating what I'm trying to remember from 20, 30 years ago is pretty important, really.
This community garden started off as a passing thought when I was walking back and forward up the railway line, which has now materialised into something that's quite special. It's a lot of wasted land that's not being used. And alongside with the rugby club itself, which is like a community-orientated organisation, I felt like bringing more community here, people that wouldn't be part of the rugby club or part of the gym. And you bring a very diverse group of people, from primary school children to people who are retired. During COVID, it became immensely obvious that there was a huge disconnect between people and where their food comes from. When Tesco's shelves were empty, people thought they couldn't get food. And I'm like, I grew up in farming, I grew up in this area. And the concept that people didn't understand that there was another way of doing things could not have been hit home more hard. And that's not a comment on them, that's a comment on our way of life now. Yeah. And the idea that people don't know that they can have food that's good for them, and it's not just good for them on a nutrient level, it's good for them for their mental well-being as well, because if you plant something, a tiny plant or a seed, and you grow food out of that, the degree to which that is freeing and empowering is mind-blowing.
Anne had the idea before I was even in the picture, and they needed a young person to manage the garden. She said, Beth, you're a young person. I said, Anne, I know nothing about gardening, and I'm not touching no slugs. And I said, I would give it a go. Because it's next to the gym and it was for something good, and there was a strong emphasis on it being youth focused, and I suppose that's more where my interest lies, in what the garden can offer young people.
I'm interested in all of it, but obviously can't do everything. So all we've been able to do is offer our garden to a group of people to come and volunteer and find out about sustainable food growing on a small scale.
We're in Whithorn and this project is called The Croft. We're trying to demonstrate to people how to grow anything, not just fruit and vegetables, using permaculture type methods. So here we've got a forest garden, and we also have no dig beds, and we're very much focused on making sure that we don't damage the environment or impact on wildlife with what we're growing.
I'll come for my cake.
I think there's an element of community and being able to talk to like-minded people and feel that they're contributing to improving the environment and hopefully combating, in our small part of the world, the climate crisis.
When we first started farming, we were obviously learning as we went. So we fell into, I'm going to call it a conventional trap. So we got a few sheep and then we got more sheep and then the sheep got ill. So we bought kind of things to keep the sheep healthy. And we realised that we needed to buy things in bulk to kind of get a cost-effective system in place. And we felt like we were constantly fighting just to survive, really. And then all of a sudden we kind of stumbled across this idea of regenerative farming. And it was almost like a eureka light bulb moment, like it didn't have to be this constant fight and struggle, that actually we could completely step back and work with nature and let nature almost not even do the hard work, just work. And then all we had to do was almost like custodian it and look after it.
There's billions of microorganisms in 1 teaspoon of soil. And if you haven't got healthy soil, you haven't got healthy plants, you haven't got healthy animals or healthy humans. So that's where it starts.
So when we talk about working regeneratively, we're looking to work with natural cycles so that we never take more from the land than it can give. So we're not putting synthetic fertilisers or chemicals on the ground. We're working with these natural cycles and getting nutrients through the soil and getting different plants and all the diversity to help produce really good nutritional forage for our animals, who can then produce really good nutritional food.
If regenerative farming never had a kind of woolly, fluffy, hippie, dog and stick image, well, I don't believe that to be the case, because there's so much more involved. You've got to be aware of the soil, so to get production without artificial fertiliser, the soil has to be in better health. The first and biggest thing is trying to learn to graze differently, to leave more, so that they've a high intensity but short time frame sit on the blocks of grazing, so they then move on, and the idea being the plant is not having to force up a regrowth which then gets grazed, which depletes its roots too quickly, and it's getting my head round that for having been used to doing it a different way. I'm hoping that this will mean I can turn out earlier in the spring with lower winter feed costs, because that's the big thing.
I'll have the cattle within a sort of small electric fence that moves every couple of days, just like 2 or 3 days ahead of the chickens. So the cows get the really long grass and sort of munch it down and squash a lot of it down. And then the chickens come in a few days later and sort of scratch all that out. They sort of scarify the ground and spread all the cowpats out and eat all the bugs and beasties. It's all part of the kind of soil building process.
In the polytunnel, we've just got closed loop systems where anything that's getting taken out is getting composted and then it's put back into the soil.
It's becoming natural to us when we have waste to think, oh, how can we reuse that? And most of the time we can. So we're using windows as cold frames. We're using bricks as little walls for making sure that we've got delineated paths. So we very rarely have to buy anything or ever have to buy anything in. We've got willow growing. Willow's been fabulous for obviously growing things up. Windproofing as well, which is quite essential around here.
We should be using absolutely everything that we produce. Nothing should be wasted. If something's going to waste or you have a waste product, then there's something wrong with the system, I think.
It's an entirely different system of farming for the farm. and in a sense the farm has to get used to us as well. It's a symbiotic relationship. I think the local farmers probably do wonder what we're doing because, you know, it's a bit different. We're not having huge numbers of cows turning up every week and shipping off, and it's an entirely different approach.
We went organic, started conversion about 25 years ago, and we were financially worse off for most of the first 10 years than we would have been had we stayed with conventional. Firstly, we didn't really know what we were doing. And the biggest problem is really your mindset. You know, you have to change the way you're thinking about things rather than always intervening and putting stuff in to change what's happening. It's stepping back, having the patience to step back and try to understand what's going on and to facilitate the good things. And what we saw was the soils recovering from all the hammering of chemicals that we've been putting on for decades. Crop yields recovering to the point where our stock carry on the farm was getting back to where it had been without the chemicals. But our costs had shrunk away because we weren't having to buy fertilisers and pesticides and things. It was this time Wilma and our visitor centre manager and my mother and various women in my life were saying, why take the calves away from the cows? And it was also the visitors to the visitor centre. Of all the things that they were disappointed about in what we were doing, it was about taking the calves away from their mothers at birth, more or less. Then the opportunity arose because the old dairy was unfit for purpose. We went across to the Netherlands, saw some guys doing cow with calf there. We thought, that doesn't look too bad, we could do that. We started building the new dairy and incorporated cow with calf in that. And then 2012, we launched cow with calf. And we gave that up after 5 months because it just wasn't working. And it was a bit like, I suppose, conversion to organic. We abandoned it at that time, looked at it again, went back in 2016, this time committed to giving it our best shot. And now that we've got it going, the calves are growing twice as fast as they were before. The cows are giving 25% more milk. Every year is getting better. Costs are going down at a time when everyone else's costs are rocketing because they're so reliant on buying stuff in.
We have this network called the Regenerative Farming Network South West Scotland, so any farmer can sign up to it. And I add 1 or 2 new people to that every week. The subscribers to the Regen Farm Network receive an email from me once a week called the Regen Roundup that is kind of packed full of links to events and resources and webinars and in real life stuff and online stuff where they can kind of expand their knowledge base around, you know, what are we talking about when we're talking about regenerative farming? What do we mean by fair and sustainable food systems? Every month we organise a farm walk to somebody's farm somewhere in Dumfries and Galloway or into Ayrshire because it's South West Scotland as well. And that's an opportunity for farmers to come out on farm and meet each other, to look at what each other is doing around kind of nudging towards more sustainable, more regenerative practice. The Scottish Government are currently writing their new agriculture bill, so we've had opportunities to engage with that process and get the voices of regenerative and agri-ecological farmers around those tables. So just by having that network, it's an opportunity to kind of raise more awareness and encourage more farmers to adopt more sustainable practices, you know, by saying, oh look, he's doing it down the road and she's doing it up the road, and maybe I could try that here, and it kind of makes it more normal.
There's a lot of resistance to this way, it'll never pay the bills. And there's still a bit in me that you have this wobble now and again, you think, no, I just need to buy fertiliser, just get back to what I was doing. So that's why the soil health group has been quite good, and we have a WhatsApp group which again is quite good, because if you come across something like dung beetles, we had a talk with Sally Ann Spence about dung beetles. I'll never look at a lump of shit the same again. I'm serious. You just see all the holes in it and you think, oh, what year was that? Was that the wee copper year or the gold year or the brown year, or is that the black year or that sort of harlequin year? And you're digging among it, hunting to see.
It's almost like a really strong community in Dumfries and Galloway of people looking to do the same thing. When you do something well and you can see it working, it's really encouraging to keep doing it. So when we started off, all of our fields looked like lovely mown lawns. And the more we kind of improve our grazing, the more it looks like a wildflower meadow, and you see the insects come back, and then you see the bird life and the different wildlife. At the same time, the sheep are absolutely thriving off it, and it just makes it a fantastic place to work and to live.
My main job outside of the market garden is the coordinator for D&G Good Food. And we've done quite a lot of surveying work with citizens of Dumfries and Galloway and asked them, you know, what would you like to see change around the Dumfries and Galloway's food system? And around 90% say they want better access to local food.
Because it's a rural community, a lot of producers are down quite a long farm track, and it's really difficult for them to make contact with people. So they can go to farmers markets, but there aren't that many people going to them. So this is just another avenue for them to connect with the customer and tell their story.
Producer markets are generally, I think, great for community engagement and putting a face to the produce and getting yourself known and out there. But in order to make your stall look amazing, you have to harvest a lot of produce, and if all that doesn't sell, then it's compost, and the margins are really slim on vegetables anyway. So yeah, I find the direct sale a much easier way to go. So to buy my veg, I set up a Hidden Veg Facebook page and set up the Open Food Network shop. So any food producer or food hub can open a shop on the Open Food Network. It was designed specifically to support the local food economy.
Well, firstly, we sell sort of micro-local to Auchencairn, because we're just outside. So we sell at the village shop, and we sell to Balcarry Bay Hotel. And then out with Auchencairn, we sell to other shops and cafes and restaurants. And then we sell through the Glenkens Food Hub, and we've got our own Open Food Network shop.
We sell all of our meat as locally as possible. We do also supply our organic lamb to Marks and Spencer's, so that goes to the local abattoir, and again it's something that the sheep get put on the trailer by myself and I drive them down there, so it's quite a local, even though they're going into a national food system, it is still a very local operation. And we're also part of different groups like the Glenkens Food Hub, which is a fantastic community of farmers and growers who are all working sustainably, trying to sell local food to local people across Dumfries and Galloway.
It's quite torturous, particularly with the bread, the smell of it, packing the boxes. We get very hungry. Usually we get ourselves treats to see us through the day. So the Food Hub stemmed from the Glenkens Community Action Plan, and within that action plan it was found that the community needed better connection to local food producers, especially vegetables. So there's a lot of food produced in the area, but a lot of it goes out to the kind of wider global market, and it's not available so much locally. So it was seen that there was a need within this kind of vast rural community for a hyper-local supply chain, and that's where the Food Hub fits in. So we're trying to connect good local produce to the community, and we're the bit in the middle. So we have what is called an order cycle. So you can go to our online shop on Open Food Network, and you can place your order anytime between midday Friday until midday the following Tuesday. And we collate all those orders and then send them to the producers, who then pick and make everything to order, so there's no waste, which is fantastic. And then on the following Friday we collate it, and you pick a collection point, or if you're within the Glenkens, you pick delivery when you check out, and we will get your food to you. It's been great having funding from the Blackcray Wind Farm via Foundation Scotland. Having that funding has enabled us to go out and deliver to people in rural areas, and that's just not commercially viable. You know, even the big supermarkets don't make money on delivering out to houses. The other aspect that we've developed, where we're having different collection points where volunteers have kind of come to us and said, we'd really like to take orders back from your food hub to our village.
I think I placed an order once and came here to collect it from Gateshouse, which is just about an hour's drive away from here. And several people have said to me in Gateshouse, oh, I'd love to order with the food hub, but I'm not going to drive to Dalry to pick it up. So I pick up whoever's ordered from Gateshouse, which varies. This week it's 6 boxes. At Christmas it was 13 boxes. So it enables people to support the hub and local food and just saves an awful lot of journeys on the road.
As the food hub, collaborating with other producers, you can buy my vegetables and you can buy Sueyfield's eggs and pork. You can buy low wool girth lamb and pork, Earth's Crust bakery, ethical dairy cheese. So from the consumer side, maybe that's a bit more inviting. And the food hub has a broad reach outside Glen Kens now with like pickup points in Newton Stewart and Glen Truel and Castle Douglas and then Moniaive and Thornhill as well.
If we do have any ways, so we do buy in some of the kind of more bulky veg from an organic wholesaler that isn't really grown regularly in the area, like tatties and carrots and things. And if there is any leftovers from those bags, we donate those to the food bank. And if they can't use them, they go to the Mad Hatter's Cafe and he turns them into soup and freezes it and sends them back to the food bank. So there's absolutely no waste whatsoever.
It has improved the feeling that you're eating from the place where you live.
And what does that taste like?
Oh, it tastes great. It's local and it's organic, it's ethically produced. So it ticks all the boxes. I really value the opportunity to support local producers and get something that I can't get anywhere else.
I want people to know that this is a project that's created by the community for the community. We want to try and make it accessible and affordable to everybody, and if anyone doesn't find it that way, we'd like them to kind of share with us what we can do to make it easier and more accessible for people. People shouldn't be afraid to get in touch. My phone number is everywhere. I'm surprised more people don't call me, but anybody is welcome to call me and ask me about how the food hub works and anything about the produce and how to place an order and how to change their shopping habits really, because I know it can be difficult, but perhaps before a holiday or a big birthday or particularly at Christmas, it's kind of good to dip your toe in the water and give it a try and see what you think and see whether you like us. We do have newsletters and social media which helps inform our customers about what our produce is and where it's come from, so they can learn about it that way. But for people that are interested, they can go along and visit these farms and see what the farmers are doing and talk to them about how they're working on their farm. What we have also done and what we intend to do more of in the future is to do Meet the Producer events. And at Meet the Producer event, we all kind of get together in one room and customers can come along and talk to the producers and taste the produce and ask whatever questions they have so they can connect to the people that are working those farms and making that produce.
Obviously anybody can join in the volunteer sessions, but we're also planning to involve anybody from the local community who wants to come along and learn a specific skill. So for example, grafting apple trees or how to establish no-dig beds, and maybe something very specific like wildflower identification or wildlife identification. We also have a good link with the local community centre, and the idea with that is that we'll establish a way that they can refer people who might want to look at food growing specifically in this area from whatever aspect, if they want to do it in their own garden or if they want to establish a food growing project that actually uses these methods and makes it a productive and local source for food.
Growing my own food is pretty important really, and it's something that I need to do, I think, to be happy and healthy. My partner and myself moved here just over 4 years ago. We're on a farm in southwest Scotland and we are creating food growing for ourselves, and then also we can give excess or sell excess to local people, donate it to the community fridge. It could get used at the community cafe, at the community centre. We do a few different projects each year. We put the polytunnel up, we've put greenhouses up, composting systems, planted fruit trees. We've got the nectarine tree that's got some nectarines on, peach tree, an orchard, food forest has been started. We've got hugel bed, put a fruit cage in, rhubarb patches, lots of tomatoes, dwarf beans, climbing beans, aubergines and chilies, cabbages, cauliflowers, sprouts, broccoli, little dogs. Hi!
The pop-up cafe was formed from the donations of food items through our partnership with Aldi Co-op and Sainsbury's. On occasions with quite a heavy donation of certain items, and the reasonable thing to do is to bring them into the pop-up cafe to utilise them, because the last thing we want is waste. Sherilyn goes out and forages, whether it's wild garlic, it's sea beet. When you read the menu you think, I've never ever tried it. I'd probably go to a restaurant and try it because it would cost an arm and a leg, but if you're coming here you can sort of taste it for a fraction of the price, and if it's good, well then you've obviously opened up your palate for something new, which is exciting as well.
We are really an unlikely pairing. This is like, I'm a proper carnivore that catches animals for a living, and Sherilyn was out foraging for stuff and was a proper vegan chef, but it would just seem to work. This is because we cover all the bases for what people want. And unless you know someone like myself that's a fisherman, most people wouldn't know how to get their hands on crab or lobster or anything like that. So there's quite a lot of people that come here and eat because they don't know if they like things as well, and they know it's been caught by somebody that they can actually ask me exactly where we caught it, and I can tell them that. And it gets you a bit closer to the source of where the food's coming from.
Yeah, and Sherilyn's so enthusiastic. You hear her, she's buzzing about, oh, I found such and such. I thought, all right, okay, what are you going to do with that? We'll wait and see. So it's a challenge that she puts on herself, and then to bring it to the community centre, then to make it into something that people are going to eat.
There's a network of foragers, because the likes of Lucy forages as well, and we all speak to each other. We've found this here and found that. So there's so much that's actually grown locally that's edible. I've got sea beet growing 2 minutes from my house, and I think it's nicer than spinach, and it's readily available for free. You just have to know where to look at the right time of year as well.
There's a really active swapping that goes on here now. Myself and Sherilyn started up the crop swaps 3 years ago, so lots of people come to share excess produce and plants and seeds, and anything to do with gardening, growing food and eating food. That's got lots of people exchanging ideas and skills, lots of people learning how to grow food and what kind of things work in the area. I know that if I grow a certain type of bean here and it does well, you know, I can share it with people in the same area and it should work for them.
And people bring the surplus crops, seeds, plants, anything you can think of to do with gardening, but they actually swap, I don't know, jam, pickles, flowers, bread, baking. They just bring anything along, and that's a really fabulous community to be part of.
The apples are the things that we do have a lot of surplus of, so we have an apple day where people can come along and donate to get juiced apples or apples themselves. And then there's a project that somebody locally runs which is called Macca's Abundance. So if there are surplus apples, she has a network where she can distribute them locally.
Always one trying to show me up.
It does become a way of life. And you forget what normal people do on a weekend or an evening, and it all becomes like obsession about staring at sheep and looking at soil. And I'd like to think it's a trend that's going to become more and more mainstream because I'm optimistic. But I think sometimes you realise we've still got a lot of work to do because no farm can operate just as a single island. It has to be lots of farmers working on lots of different projects to make a huge landscape-wide change that's actually going to make a difference.
When we started making cheese 10 years ago, it was Finlay's farmhouse cheese. And just kept being said, right, so what does that tell anybody other than somebody called Finlay is making cheese? And just kept pushing and saying it's got to be the ethical dairy, it's got to be the ethical dairy. And eventually we relented. It asks a question and people will come and say, so why the ethical dairy? And that just opens everything up. They wouldn't come to you and say, so why Finlay's farmhouse cheese?
We're tenant farmers here, you know, so it's not easy. It's trying to prove it at a working farm level. It is possible to be respectful, to be empathetic, to be ethical and still be profitable, you know. And that is the difficult bit, is because the farmers don't believe that you can be profitable and deliver all this so-called public goods, but we can. We've almost sacrificed our local community, which was the agricultural community, where we have become outlawed in a way, because we are challenging the very roots of the conventional farming belief system. And that's it's very distressing for anyone, where someone comes along and tells you you're doing something wrong, when you think you're doing the right thing, and you've been told you've been doing the right thing by everyone that you come into contact with through education and through social and through business. There is a huge pushback from the industry right up to politicians at the top, because they see the model that we've got as being a threat to jobs and growth. They don't see that what we could be doing is actually providing good quality, well-paid, well-remunerated jobs that are meaningful to the people that are doing them, that are contributing positively to the health and well-being of society through production of healthy, good food. That is where the emphasis should go. It should be going into supporting the health of the soils and the crops and the animals and the people, not corporations, which is where all money is going at the moment.
It's 27 acre in this field. If you set the plough in it, you'll be lucky to plough 18. But that doesn't mean that the rest of this has no value. It's got shelter, it's got a beauty of its own, never mind the wildlife habitat. There's tons when you really stop to look. When they move to an area-based payment, a lot of these high nature value areas have to be excluded for the claim. So you're effectively telling me that's worth nothing. And because it's worth nothing, folk rip it out, try and make the land eligible. Well, even this wee tin pot business, since the start of the scheme, it'll be £60,000 plus in direct subsidy I have foregone by not ripping out the whins and leaving these bits. If you multiply that up to money returned back to the wider rural economy, that represents quite a lot of cash that I have not put back by having what I consider to be a higher nature value farm. So that is what it costs to have places like this.
Although people want higher welfare, they want it as cheap as possible.
And for us, the costs are more because we've fewer cattle to go through. You know, we're not shipping out 20 odd a week to go to a sausage machine. We're shipping out, you know, for a year.
I think there's just got to be a wider education on the whole, you know, down to where the food comes from, the welfare, as Francis was saying, but we've got to look at the cost as well. To put food on someone's table is really not cheap.
I mean, the main challenges for us are trying to become a viable business, because nobody's doing it here because it's a really difficult thing to do. Other challenges are, I guess, price. How much money we need to make, yet still make it affordable for people is kind of something that we're balancing at the moment, and to make it accessible and affordable for the producers as well. There's no kind of one template about how you should run a food hub, but on the Open Food Network there's a lot of kind of similar type businesses, so it's been really great chatting with them, finding out what they've learned. Every hub we're learning how to improve and how to get better and how to get more efficient.
Our biggest challenge is the lack of hours in the day. And then I guess financial challenges, like food doesn't cost very much to buy, so it takes quite a lot of effort to grow enough to, make a living. It's not easy.
It's certainly not a part-time job. If you want to do it seriously, you need to be here all the time. The main benefits is the food. We don't go hungry, ever.
Yeah. And we eat like kings.
Yeah.
Fresh, healthy, nutritious food. Being outside all the time, working outside with a physical job, working with the soil, keeps you happy, doesn't it? It's like therapy every day.
I think smaller scale benefits everybody. We know 90% of the people within a 2-mile radius of us who buy our veg. They know us, we know them, they feel comfortable to come and help and have a look and just visit from time to time.
I remember when we started here, it was just grass from one fence to another in both fields. We had this thing about docks, like we've got to take out the docks, And then actually now we're like, they're really deep rooted, they take in nutrients from deep in the soil, they're then putting that back out on the surface. And then actually as I sort of stopped this war on docks, one winter the bullfinches appeared and were eating the dock seeds. And now we have a whole family of bullfinches living in the tree at the bottom of the garden. Yeah, it really gave me quite a lot of hope actually to see how quickly things can change and how quickly nature can come back,
We have so many young groups interested, which has actually blown my mind. I was biased, okay, I wasn't that interested in gardening. But how many young groups of people want to come down, and we have so much scope to offer workshops and skills and learning, but we need to have things here and the garden needs to be functional for those things to happen. This has been one of the biggest learning things for me is it's a community garden. Ask the community for things. You don't have to have it all set up and perfect. The community can come together to donate and to build and create it.
It's helped me to garden better in my own garden and better for the environment and better for myself, I think, really. The one thing that I think I would wish people would understand is that it's okay to abandon your traditional ways, say for example digging, to try to understand that not always digging everything is okay, and not only okay, it works really well. And even some of the volunteers who've been doing it for months and months, they still question it, not in a challenging way, but just they can't quite get their heads around it because we're all older really, and I think it's something that we've grown up doing. But as the project continues, as it progresses, we can see that it works. We can see with our own eyes and our hands that the soil is better for it. And we feel that it's not a bad thing to show people when we've done things that haven't worked, because we learn that way and we can also make people feel slightly better. It's not perfect.
Folks start talking to one another, even if they don't know them, but the tables and chairs are so close, so before you know it, the whole place is buzzing with conversation. And people come down just purely to have that interaction with others. In fact, the negative part is we just don't have enough room now to cater for everybody who wants to come.
There's a lady that comes in, Dora. She says she sat down at many a restaurant table and looked at like a crab and lobster on the menu, but she didn't know if she liked it. So she wasn't going to spend 15 to 20 odd quid to find out she didn't like something. She says she loves being able to come in. She's tried scallops, she's tried crab, she's tried lobster and found out she likes them all now. And like you get a sense of achievement out of that you've actually opened somebody's horizons basically to something they didn't actually know they liked. And yeah, it makes me feel like quite decent, so it does actually.
There are people who come who are sceptical because they say, so what makes you ethical? And then by the end of the tour, by the time they've seen the cows and calves and heard the whole farm system, they're absolutely on board, and that's very gratifying as well. Our support community now is like-minded people across UK and beyond. You know, the internet, for all its problems, it does connect people globally now, and we have visitors now coming from the furthest ends of the earth, Australia, New Zealand, Americas, Europe. It has totally transformed our community.
If you're buying from a local producer, they are getting the bulk of that profit. Whereas if you're buying from a supermarket, that farmer is getting so little of that profit. So for me, it just kind of really supports small local businesses.
We're trying to create a grassroots up, farmer-led movement, but actually it is going to come through policy as well. Farmers are going to have to demonstrate that they are improving soil health and improving biodiversity indicators to get enhanced farm payments in the future. So there is a bit of a let's get ahead of the game, but also we'll be here to support farmers when they're suddenly being told that they've got to do it because it's a law.
I would like to see policymakers understanding, acknowledging what farmers do. It's not only about taking that brown envelope and about ticking the boxes. Because we live here and want to work here and probably grew up here, we do care about it. Most farmers really do care about it. I don't want to say, oh look, we do everything right, because I'm sure there's always things we can do better. But I think there's an awful lot that we do right.
Especially in Dumfries and Galloway, I think we're very, very lucky that we've still got a lot of rustic kind of small holdings and people who are kind of in charge of their own farms. There's enough of us here who care, so it's almost developed a community, and then it becomes easy for other people who are maybe just on the fence but not sure how to start. You kind of almost gather a bit of momentum, and I think that's why regenerative is a trend that's growing, because it's so easy and so welcoming for people to get on board. And again, as soon as you start and you see the difference, then it becomes easier to keep going. Whereas I think a lot of people will try something a little bit half-hearted so the neighbours don't see and don't laugh. And if it goes wrong, then they're like, right, that's it, I'm not doing that again. That was embarrassing. But again, once you kind of get your foot on the ladder, it's like, this is a good idea. And when we talk about sustainability, we're also talking about families who are running farms who want to pass the farm on to the younger generation. So farmers are always looking for ways to kind of make their farm viable and continue its legacy.